Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with the Harry Potter spells tag. I will be doing the combined version that was created by Dreamland Book Blog, which I will link down below, and I was tagged by the wonderful Manal from Manal and Her Books, and I will also link her channel down below. Unfortunately, I do not have a Harry Potter wand to use during the tag, but I do have a Time Turner necklace, I'm wearing my Ravenclaw blue lipstick, and my shirt does have a cape attached, so I think we're good to go. Wish number 1 is Flagrate, Writing Charm, a book that you found interesting but would like to rewrite. So I am actually going with I Am the Messenger by Markus Zusak. Now, of course, Markus Zusak wrote The Book Thief, which is one of my favorite books of all time, and I did really enjoy this book, although not as much as The Book Thief. But there is one thing that I really would like to change about this book, and it's actually not the ending. I know that ending is really divisive and a lot of people hate it, and I can understand why they don't like it. I actually really enjoyed the ending, but there's this one thing that's like this really unnecessary romantic subplot that I would cut out or resolve differently that I really didn't like. Number 2 is Alohomora, Unlocking Charm, a first book in a series that got you hooked. And my answer for this one is Angel Fall by Susan E. This is the first book in a trilogy that I pretty much binge read. I picked up the first book a couple of years ago because it was really cheap online and I had heard really amazing things about it. It had gotten good reviews. So I decided to take a chance and just get the first book because I wasn't completely sold on the concept. I wasn't sure I was gonna like it. Because I don't like post-apocalyptic, I don't like paranormal romance, but this book was so good. I flew through this, I immediately ordered the next 2 books, and I pretty much read the series back to back, or close to it. Number 3 is Accio, or Accio. I always said Accio when I was reading the books for some reason, but in the movies they always said Accio, so now I'm conflicted, but you know. Summoning Spell, a book that you wish you could have right now. And I'm going to go with Defy the Worlds by Claudia Gray. That is the sequel to Defy the Stars, which was one of my favorite books of last year, and I loved it so much. It doesn't quite end on a cliffhanger exactly. You are definitely left wanting more as soon as you finish that book, at least I was, and it's coming out next month, right around my birthday, so I'm really hoping that the conclusion to that duology lives up to all of my expectations. Number 4 is Avada Kedavra, Killing Curse, a killer book. So I interpreted this pretty literally, and I went with Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevers. And it follows an order of assassin nuns who kill people in the name of their god of death. And it was so good. The series is actually being continued, which I am really excited about, but I really loved this first book and the second one. I know a lot of people prefer the second book to the first one, and objectively, I definitely agree that it's probably a better constructed book, but there was something about this first one that just... Number 5 is Confundo, Confusion Charm, a book you found confusing. For that one, I'm going with Vasa in the Night by Sarah Porter. This is a modern urban retelling of the Vasilisa the Beautiful story or folktale, and I did like this book. It definitely is supposed to be confusing, so it didn't really bother me. Like, I knew going in that this was going to be a very weird book, and it was. But for the most part, I think the weirdness actually worked. Like, the setting and the story and the descriptions all felt united in their kind of weirdness, if that makes any sense. So I actually did like this book, but it's definitely a bizarre one. Number 6 is Expecto Patronum, Guarding Spell, your spirit animal book. And for that one, I'm going with Wintersmith by Terry Pratchett. This is the 3rd book in the Tiffany Aching series, which is kind of a sub-series in the Discworld series, but this is definitely a book that like describes me as a person, I guess, because it's a very cold and wintry feeling book, and winter is my favorite season, and it's a very magical and strange kind of fantasy book. It pokes fun at some fairy tale or fantasy tropes, which I always love, but it still is a story about small decisions and about ordinary people doing things and making changes and saving the world, which is something I really love. It's got my favorite color, green, on the cover and spine. And last but not least, it's a book that's very hard to pin down to a specific age range, because the age of the main character would maybe suggest middle grade, but the series of the Tiffany Aching books overall feels more like a YA, and I see it marketed as YA, but Discworld itself is sort of an adult fantasy series, and just, I am all about that overlapping age range confusion, because if you guys have been on my channel for a while, you know that I pretty much don't hold with those distinctions at all. Number 7 is Secta Sempra, Dark Curse, a dark, twisted book. And for this one, I actually went with The Kingdom of Little Wounds by Suzanne Kokel. And I think the reason that it's so dark and frightening is that it's very realistic in the way that it is scary, because it's a sort of historical feeling, quasi-fantasy, not really sure. It's mainly historical, and the things that happen to our three main characters, who are all women, are horrifying in their realism, and especially for that time period, it's just such a brutal world, and the author is extremely talented at creating a scene and a setting, so you really do get a sense of the desperation and the abuse that these women are suffering from, and it's just a really hard book to read, but ultimately, at the end, I was glad I finished it. There were definitely a few parts where I wanted to put this book down and I almost abandoned it, and I definitely wouldn't go into this one lightly. Like, there's definitely trigger warnings for sexual abuse, but I do think it has some important things to say about gender and history and the way that we tell women's stories in particular. Number 8 is Expecto Patronum, again, Guarding Spell, a childhood book connected to good memories. This one might be a little odd because it's not precisely a happy story or even really a children's story, but I'm going with The Nutcracker, specifically this version that is by E.T.A. Hoffman with the illustrations by Maurice Sendak, and the translation is by Ralph Manheim. So we've had this book for pretty much as long as I can remember, and I have so many memories over Christmas break of my mom and my brother and sister and I reading parts of it and making it part of the lead up to Christmas, and especially in middle school and high school where we got a nice long Christmas break. I just have so many memories of like curling up with a blanket and reading this story, or even just having cocoa and intending to read this book and then never getting to it. Just this book is connected to so much like comfort and this idea of being home for Christmas, and it's just really important to me for that reason. Plus the story itself is also pretty interesting and I actually do enjoy it. Number 9 is Expelliarmus, Disarming Spell, a book that took you by surprise. And for that one, I am going with Princess of Thorns by Stacey J. So I loved Stacey J's book of Beast and Beauty, and I kept wanting to pick up something else by her. But every time I'd be tempted to get this book, I would read the reviews, and so many people who I trusted really didn't like this book. And then one day I was in the bookstore and I saw it again, read the first couple pages, and it sounded great, so I just bought it. But this was such a surprisingly complex and wonderful fantasy story. It's not a fairy tale retelling, and I think the mismarketing of this book really played into the negative reviews, but I ended up loving the story and the main characters, even the male lead, who made a really bad first impression on me. But this book is just so good, and I still think about it. Number 10 is Priori Incantato, Reverse Spell, the last book you read. Now, what I just finished, actually only a few minutes before I started filming this video, was The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. Number 11 is Ridiculous, Boggart Banishing Spell, a funny book you've read. The Tough Guide to Fantasyland by Diana Wynne Jones. It's sort of set up as like a dictionary or like a guide to Fantasyland, and basically it's poking fun at all of those well-known fantasy tropes that we know and love. If you enjoy fantasy at all as a genre, or if you're even just passingly familiar with it, I think you will really enjoy this book. Number 12 is Sonorous, Amplifying Charm, a book you think everybody should know about. I'm going with Gullstruck Island by Frances Hardinge. This book is one of the most well-constructed novels I think I've ever read. Like, the setting and the world building is so seamless that you feel like Frances Hardinge knows this world so well that it feels real. Like, it feels like you could actually find it on a map or in a reference book. And this book has such incredibly powerful things to say about colonization and criticizing that imperialistic attitude. And the main character is a member of the indigenous population that exists on this island, so it's also a very diverse book in that respect, and all of the characters are just so complex and wonderful, and Hathen, the protagonist, is probably in my top 5 female characters I've ever read. Number 13 is Obliviate, Memory Charm, a book or spoiler you would like to forget having read. So rather than going with a book I hated so much I would like to delete it from my brain, of which I do have a few good examples, I'm actually going to go with a spoiler that I've known for a long time, and that is for Ruin and Rising, the 3rd book in the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I don't remember a time when I didn't know everything, like all of the main events that happen in this final book. And I think part of that is my fault from like reading reviews, but I specifically remember a couple of big things that happen that I did not spoiler myself for. It's like if you were watching any booktube videos in the last however many years, you probably heard about this series, and at some point I just got spoiled for pretty much everything that happens. So I'm just really not motivated to pick up this next book at the moment, although I do want to get to it soon because, again, this is the last one in the trilogy, and I do want to move on to the Six of Crows duology. Number 14 is Imperio, Controlling Curse, a book you had to read for school. So this answer is a little bit different than the question because technically I wasn't forced to read it for school. It was like an extra assignment or extra credit or something, and we could either choose Grendel by I forget who, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. I chose One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I actually really enjoyed that book. I think if I had known more about what it was about, I probably wouldn't have wanted to read it, but I actually really ended up enjoying it, and it was really thought-provoking, and I'm actually really glad that I read that book in school, which was great because most of the books I read in school did not enjoy them at all. Actually, a couple of them are my least favorite books of all time. And finally, number 15 is Crucio, Torture Curse, a book that was painful to read. And for that one, I'm going with The Sin Eater's Daughter by Melinda Salisbury. I did not like this book at all, could not stand the main character or the storyline. There was also, I don't think I mentioned this in my wrap-up, but there was also a lot of unexpected incest in this book, which I was not into. That was not a good time. There were multiple times when reading this book where a character would be introduced and I had this sneaking suspicion that we had already met them, but I couldn't remember because the book was so forgettable. Okay everybody, so that is everything I have for the Harry Potter spells tag. I am going to tag Amy from Blonde and Bookish, Olivia from ReadbyLiv, Priscilla from BookieCharm, Yvette from Book Cave, Aisha from A Chapter from Aisha, and Trisha from TellHerAStory. And of course, anybody and everybody else who sees this video and who wants to do this tag. I know a couple of the people I tagged. I've been tagging you a lot recently, so no pressure on this. If you would like to do it, that's great, and when you have time, obviously. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!